Welcome to episode 8 of What Do You Think, Utah? I'm Bill Allred, and this month's episode is called Someone Please Think of the Children. On November 5th, 2015, it came to light that the LDS Church was expressing new policies regarding church members who are in same-sex relationships and the children of those members. Here's what church policy from Handbook 1 says, the infamous Handbook 1. A natural or adopted child of a parent living in a same-gender relationship, whether the couple is married or cohabitating, may not receive a name and a blessing. That child may be baptized and confirmed, ordained, or recommended for missionary service only as follows. Got it right so far? A mission or stake president may request approval from the office of the First Presidency if he is satisfied by personal interview that both of the following requirements are met. This child accepts and is committed to living the teachings and doctrine of the church and specifically disavows the practice of same-gender cohabitation and marriage. Number 2, the child is of legal age and does not live with a parent who has lived or currently lives in a same-gender relationship of cohabitation or marriage. That's pretty final, isn't it? Also, a disciplinary council may be necessary, maybe, and is a serious transgression, including things like attempted murder, forcible rape. Is there any other kind?
Doesn't really say that. Does it really say that?
Sex abuse, spouse abuse, homosexual relations, especially sexual relations within that homosexual relationship. Now that's when a disciplinary council may be necessary. A disciplinary council is mandatory, and this is apostasy, if members are, among other things, are in a same-gender marriage. May be necessary, murder, rape, but mandatory if they're in a same-gender relationship. This is a pretty hardline stance from the Mormon Church, and it shocked and dismayed many people within the church and probably many people here in this room tonight. People were surprised, outside observers were surprised, as it appeared that the faith had been taking a softer approach to the LGBT community. To be sure, the church has long opposed same-sex marriage, but it seemed that the leadership had perhaps become somewhat more tolerant of its gay members. Certainly, nobody expected that there were going to be temple marriages for gay Mormons, or openly gay missionaries were going to be sent out to spread the gospel. Nobody expected that to happen, but nobody expected this severe about-face from the LDS Church. I'd like to introduce our panel this evening. To my immediate right, Jenny Noonan-Eckton is co-host of the Cultural Hall podcast, one of the co-sponsors of this evening's event. She is a writer with Wake Up World Communications, a boutique digital media strategy agency focusing on social action campaigns. She's a regular contributor to Global Moms Challenge, a nonprofit dedicated to connecting moms to in the U.S. to people and programs improving health and wellness for mothers, babies, and children around the world. Her work with the United Nations Foundation has taken her to Uganda, to Washington, D.C., and to lobby on Capitol Hill. She is a single mother of 6 kids, 5 alive and 1 in heaven, ranging in age from 16 to 7 years of age. Born and raised in Jamestown, New York, she now lives in Provo. She runs a small cooking business, is an author, and a certified Zumba instructor, and I said no catcalling. And she used to call our radio show, the other show that I do, this other little radio show I do, she used to call our show all the time under the nom de plume of Molly Mormon. Next, we have Kendall Wilcox, who grew up in an LDS home, served in a mission for the LDS Church, graduated from Brigham Young University. Kendall has produced hundreds of hours of Emmy Award-winning television. Since 2010, Kendall has been producing a documentary called Far Between that portrays what it means to be LGBTQI, SSA, same-sex attracted. What's the I?
Intersex.
Intersex. And Mormon. In 2012, Kendall stepped in to help Erica Munson found Mormons Building Bridges. Since 2013, Kendall has developed and grown Circles of Empathy, which is a small group discussion practice that helps straight and LGBTQI, SSA Mormons engage in the critical and challenging conversations about the conflict between the teachings of the LDS Church and their feelings about homosexuality or homosexual loved ones. Kendall was fired from his job at BYU. They said he wasn't...
I didn't show up, is what they said.
They said you weren't showing up for your office hours and you weren't doing your job.
Which is not true.
Was not true?
But they had to find some reason, yeah.
You think that was a pretext?
I know for a fact, yes.
Why do you think they fired you?
Long story. They didn't like me, yeah. So the gay thing coming out just exacerbated existing problems.
Next we have John Dehlin. John is a psychologist, researcher, podcaster, social activist, well-known podcaster. He has a PhD in clinical and counseling psychology from Utah State University. Clinical research interests involve the nexus of religion and mental health. That's a tough one, isn't it?
Fun one.
John's research has been published in numerous peer-reviewed scientific journals. Prior to obtaining his PhD, John worked for 7 years at Microsoft, 3 years at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. John is founder of Mormon Stories podcast, the most popular and longest-running podcast within Mormonism. Mormon Stories podcast was established to explore and challenge Mormon culture. John challenged it a little too much at one point, apparently, and was asked to leave the Mormon Church and was excommunicated from the Mormon Church. His work has been featured in the New York Times, National Public Radio, ABC's Good Morning America, Nightline, Wall Street Journal, Huffington Post. He's done a lot. And then finally here, a woman who's been on our panel before. She has a very active mind, and she brings a lot to any discussion. Lindsay Hansen-Park, a women's rights activist and feminist blogger, an advocate against gender violence. She's the assistant director for the Sunstone Education Foundation, the founder of the Story of Woman podcast. She blogs for feministmormonhousewives.org about women's issues. She's currently heavily involved in the Mormon feminist movement. Her work, yes, it does exist. Her work has appeared in the New York Times, the Washington Post, NPR, Los Angeles Times, many other Utah publications. Thank you for being here again.
Thanks for having me.
We also should point out that we contacted the LDS Church and asked if they'd like to send somebody to be on the panel, and
Saved a spot right here. I'll scoot over.
They didn't. They said no. I mean, they have said all they at this point choose to say through their handbook and then their clarification. John, you're the person credited with leaking the news of this policy change in Handbook 1 to the media at large and stirring up this big pile of stuff.
Why did they ask you to leave again? Why was that?
Maybe explain, first of all, to people who may not know, what is Handbook 1, and then explain how you found out about this new church policy, how you found out about it, and why you decided you should just blab about it to everybody the minute you found out about it.
So the way I understand it, the church has two handbooks to run the administration of the church. Handbook 2 is public. You can search it on the internet and read it all about it. Handbook 1 is private, and it's reserved for members of the bishopric and stake presidencies, and it's more detail about how bishops and stake presidents are to run their boards and stakes. That's my understanding.
Administratives.
Yep. It's weird that a lot of the anger has been focused on me. I was just on Reddit, the ex-Mormon Reddit, and saw people chattering about this. Someone had posted the text of the policy as it related to apostasy. Nothing had been mentioned about children at that point. And I wanted to vet the source before so I asked the person if they could send me a screenshot, and they sent me a screenshot of the text that they had posted to Reddit. I had a couple other friends verify it, and then once I knew it was legit, I shared first that screenshot, and then another friend of mine posted on Facebook the policy as it related to children, and that kind of blew me away. So I asked that friend if he could share with me something official, and he did, and he didn't want his name associated because he's still, I think he's in a stake high council. Mm-hmm. So I shared it, and I just felt like it was so important that we needed to talk about it, but it would have come out regardless. The policy is just so egregious and shocking and mind-blowing that it would have been anybody that would have leaked this. But yeah. I was sort of like, I was the sling in David's hand, You have an impish side, do you? I was merely the sling.
All right. So it was stunning to everyone who heard it. Let's get your first reaction to it, Jenny.
Yeah.
Eckton. Jenny, what was your first reaction to it?
Being involved in the media, and I know that you said this before, but I just want to make it clear that I am not a representative of the church in anything that I say here tonight. Neither is John.
I was confused.
Being involved with the media through the Cultural Hall, we kind of got a heads up about it Thursday afternoon with the understanding that it would be announced on Friday.
This is a podcast. If you're not familiar with it, it's the Cultural Hall, and you find it at
theculturalhall.com.
Theculturalhall.com.
Yep. And where we discuss all things cultural relating to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and it is for Mormons and not Mormons. That evening, I had come out of the gym and saw that my phone, everyone, what happened? What did they do to the handbook? My personal reaction was that I was devastated, saddened, confused, and I could sense a lot of hurt from a lot of different sides. And it took me a while to not take that on myself from external sources. And so my immediate reaction from there was just to call for love and understanding from all sides as we move forward and understanding and trying to understand what's going on.
Lindsay, you, a member of the LDS Church in good standing, so far.
So far, yeah.
Your reaction initially?
Well, I am not LGBT. I consider myself an ally, so I don't know what it's like to grow up, gay in the church. So just putting that out there, I think that that's different. I think that it's different for me as an ally processing. But I'll be honest with you, when my friend, a fellow Mormon feminist, Kate Kelly, was excommunicated from the church, it was really difficult for me, and I cried a lot. And I thought that I had cried my last tear for stuff that sometimes the church does. But when I saw this, I got hot, angry tears in my eyes, which shocked even me, because I'm not, I've never been a gay kid growing up in the church. I've never had to have that battle, but I know so many that have, and I've held members, gay brothers and sisters in the church who have been hurt or, sobbing. I've held their sobbing, shaking bodies before, and that's what I thought of when I heard this, is just why this? Why? It felt so utterly, devastatingly pointless. And so it's important for me to note that I'm just an ally, and so I feel like my feelings are secondary to the people who are actually directly affected, but it was very difficult for me.
Kendall, you're still a member
Yes.
of the church. You're an out gay man.
Gay, yeah.
In a relationship?
No.
Not. Do you still go to church?
Yes.
Your reaction initially?
So John tagged me online, and which I appreciated, but I was like, no, what? And so immediately did not respond well, actually, no. Totally honest, I was the first person to comment on your post, and then I deleted it. Because I was like, wait a minute, I'm reacting to something, no offense to the brother. I need to verify, because you just have to. So I called my 2 best sources, and within about an hour and a half, I had what I felt was an official, this is real. And then I started to react, and it was not fun. It was horrible. For about 48 hours, I've said elsewhere that it was like a gut punch, because in my process of trying to figure out how to be a gay and Mormon, I've been involved, like you said, in Mormons building bridges, based on a premise that there is a way to build some bridges, that the conflict between the experience of being LGBT and the doctrine of the church may, in some senses, be irreconcilable for now. But that there's so much ground that we can build on. I mean, it doesn't have to be so acrimonious. So I and a bunch of my colleagues really took it personally. Like we caused some severe introspection that we had really led people down a fool's path. We're leading people astray.
In retrospect, now that you've had time to reflect on it, all of you, have your feelings changed in any way about it? Have you started to feel even more anger and upset about it, or have your feelings tempered about it?
I've definitely calmed down. And in fact, it's turned from like sort of curled up in a ball situation to I'm actually more energized than I ever was before. Because in a sense, I was surprised by the punitive nature of some of this, especially towards the children. That was sort of new to me, like, what? And to cast this in this area of apostasy when it's not the same thing. But once I got past all that, I'm actually not at all surprised. This is just, for me, a step towards sort of the escalation and the conflict that is inevitable. And in some senses, not to be glib, because it has caused a lot of pain and will for a long time, but I relish this because it's like woken up a whole new brand of Mormons that like, wait a minute, do we really? Is this what we really are like? And I'm like, welcome to the party, and let's do something. So
It's not a great party. Like, this isn't my favorite party. I've been to better parties.
we'll try. We'll try better music.
Jenny, have your feelings tempered on it at all?
Yeah, I feel for myself that the shock and the kind of just genuine surprise has sort of mellowed as I'm able to, as Kendall indicated, like just more focus on what it means, on what different aspects mean of what's in the handbook. A letter was released last week from the First Presidency to local leaders on the stake and ward levels to clarify some of the policy. Of course, Elder Christofferson released his video interview as well for clarification. And in thinking about it and having thoughtful and deliberate discussion about the matter, I'm able to more come to terms with, okay, this is more what it means. Whether or not I or anyone else agrees with it, this is what it is.
John, I heard on your podcast a discussion of it, and there was a discussion saying that, first there was this issue of this is policy and not doctrine. And some people are kind of feeling, making themselves feel better with that, a little tidbit, and maybe you can discuss that. And then I also heard somebody say, I think, that they thought maybe that bishops in various wards would just sort of eventually start ignoring this policy and just do what they felt was what they felt was right for their individual ward members and their ward.
Yeah, just to give a really brief response to your previous question, when I was really feeling sad and frustrated about this, I told my wife about it, Margie. She made a really interesting observation. She's like, "Tell me why this is bad again?" And I'm like, "Oh, well, it's going to hurt children and LGBT people." And her point was, she thinks it actually is really positive that many of these children who do have gay or lesbian parents won't be put in the position of receiving very harming messages about their parents. And in that sense, you can almost take the church's word at face value that is actually a compassionate thing, that the extent to which there are less children with LGBT parents who don't have to be subjected to damaging messages about their parents is a good thing. But I also think that, as someone who wanted to be a progressive Mormon, a liberal Mormon for a long time, it was always really difficult for me to hear, President Packer say really difficult things, or Uchtdorf or whoever, but then to have them bring out Elder Jensen or someone else saying something more progressive and liberal, and you never quite know what church you're dealing with. And Margie's insight was that it's to their credit that they're saying this is where we stand, and these are the lines we're drawing, and don't have any illusion about where things are right now. And that clarity allows people to know where they stand relative to the organization and to make an informed choice. And there's some integrity in that on the part of the church, I think. And it can help a lot of people see more clearly what they want to do as a result. So as far as the policy doctrine thing, I think we're all wondering what doctrine means these days. Mm-hmm. So much has changed with church doctrine that it's almost become meaningless. So policy is really where the rubber meets the road. So I don't know that, as an ally, again, I don't know that my LGBT brothers and sisters are going to take solace in the fact that this is just a policy, because it affects real lives.
They, on the clarification that the First Presidency put out, they signed their names. And for a Mormon who, like you said, we don't have these clear distinctions between policy and doctrine, but for a Mormon, when the prophet signs his name to a document, that's a big deal. Mm-hmm. And I think that a lot of people, at least that I'm seeing, are going to see that, if not now, but eventually as doctrine. I mean, because we don't have these clear defining roles of what policy versus doctrine is.
Yeah, I think that sort of talk is just sort of food for progressives to give them hope that someday things will change. Honestly.
Yeah.
We all want to think maybe not all the brethren agreed on this. Maybe there's some who are still supportive. Maybe the church is going to be positive in the future. And it probably will. In 20, 30, 40 years, they will have to change. But I don't see a lot of hope in the policy versus doctrine distinction.
If any of you have questions or comments you want to make, you can come up to the microphone here and we'll get to you. We should start doing that pretty soon. So start lining up if you have questions or comments about how this has affected you, or if you have a question or a comment you want to make on the policy. There was a mass resignation from the church this past weekend. Some people said there were, as many as 2,000 people handing in their resignations. Then say, well, a lot of those people were inactive anyway, and whatever. But it got a lot of coverage. It had a lot of impact. Do you think that that's going to go further? Will this hurt the church just in terms of sheer numbers?
Well, numbers-wise, sure. If you're looking at it as a numbers game.
Well, that's what they do. They do look at it as a numbers game. It is a numbers game for the LDS Church. They like to keep those names on the record because that's their membership, and they tout that.
I think that is that's one aspect of it, especially because for so long we'll hear things like fastest growing church, largest, etc. Those sort of one-liners or statistics, but. I think that that there's value in staying. Because for people like me, who I am an active Mormon. I am someone who I'm an active Mormon. And I would like to see change, and the change that will happen from within the church. So people who think differently from the policies that have been laid out. Policy can change. Policy does change. That happens from within. Thanks.
I warned you, Skippy.
I know, Skip. When you leave, your efficacy as a change maker is diminished. And there is such value in a variety of voices, which exists genuinely.
Can I push back on that?
Yeah.
Sure. So in progressive Mormonism, this is like a topic that we always talk about, change from within or from without. I actually think change comes in a multitude of ways. In any sort of activism, in any sort of social movement, there are all different approaches to sort of get this thing done. And the only thing I'd push back on is this narrative of like change has to come from within, because in Mormonism, in my experience, probably one of the most harmful rhetoric that we are given, that we inherited, is our in-group versus out-group, that you can only have a say, you can only care if your membership is in good standing. And this rhetoric has harmed countless people. It has harmed me. I have people say, why do you care about the church if you're not an active member of the church? As if Mormonism has had zero impact on my life or doesn't continue to do that. So I just really want to push back on that narrative to say that you can only be invested, or you can only change, or you only have capital, which is true. I mean, the reality is, it's true. Within the Mormon church, you have capital. When you're excommunicated, you lose capital to the Mormon church. But that is a narrative that I want to reject and I want to fight against, because that is at the root of a lot of these issues. You can't be with us. You can't be part of us. And Mormonism is larger than just a religion. It's a movement.
I don't disagree with that. I think that's correct, but what I'm getting to is more to the point of, I think of it as in terms of sitting in a Sunday school class and there's a narrative going on of, oh, well, those people with the problems,
Sure.
those people, and and I raise my hand and say, I'm one of those people. And I'm someone who XYZ fulfills this, checklist of what it means to be an active Mormon, and that's okay. It's okay for someone who's an active Mormon to question.
I just want to though, is this going to put a dent in the Mormon Church in terms of its membership?
Numbers you're talking?
Yeah, numbers.
Or?
Will it put a dent?
Well,
I don't think it's doing any favors to the youth.
Nothing significant?
No.
No? It'll still...
To the core, no. There's no. And it's borne out in the numbers, right? That most people were already inactive that showed up. I was there at the resignation, and so it's already it's there in the numbers. Long term, though, it's just adding to the conflict. Does that make sense? So the conflict is already playing out in the millennials and that are turning into nuns and so on. So this just exacerbates it.
I think there's a group of a solid percentage majority of active LDS church members that are untouchable. There's, you could find pictures of Joseph Smith with women and they wouldn't care,
Well, they did.
But I do think that it's going to it definitely is going to increase the number of people who leave, and it's definitely put cracks in a lot of true believing Mormons' faith. And I'll say, I just interviewed on Mormon Stories the granddaughter of M. Russell Ballard, who resigned her membership this week. It's the first member of his sort of posterity that has ever left the church, and I do think that this was part of the trigger for that. And so I think we're going to see some well-placed, valued, notable members of the church leave over
What about
this.
a schism?
There's always schisms. There's always schism.
Yes.
I don't think this is on, but I can talk really loud.
Go ahead. Get up close to it. It's on.
Okay. Okay. Hi. So I'm Janie, and my husband and I have been active, but lately we have not been active, and we're questioning it, largely to do with a lot of different things. But there's two things I wanted to point out that has been in my mind. I want to know what you think about it. One is there's been a lot of comments on my Facebook and different of my religious friends who say this is a great way to weed out those Mormons who really aren't even strong in the faith. And I've heard a lot of that. So how is it that we can have all these different discussions and all these different ideas if people are thinking, it's good to just weed them out anyway? Second thing I wanted to say is that you cannot argue that this is the good for the children if in the letter that we were given by the First Presidency, they stated that the children can still be active in the church, but they just can't be baptized. Well, if they're going to be active in the church, they're still going to learn that their parents are gay, that they can't be gay, that they'll not have the high ceiling of glory, and that doesn't make any sense, because if you're going to not want them to hear about that, then why are you still allowing them to come and hear about that? So that argument is kind of invalid, in my opinion. So, yeah.
Anybody, you want to respond to that, Kendall?
I mean, yeah, it's disingenuous at best. Yeah. Not a well thought out plan. There was no plan. I know that. What was your first question?
The wheat and the tares.
Oh, and that's just spiritually lazy. That's not Mormonism that I subscribe to or would endorse in any way. That's absolutely wrong. Wrong way to engage in our religion.
I would call it fundamentalist thinking. Those who know the work that I do a podcast called Year of Polygamy as well, like podcasting. And we cover the history of Mormon polygamy, and I deal with a lot of Mormon fundamentalists, and you see this sort of thinking. It's inherent, it's built into religious tradition. It's for groups to be able to identify themselves, but those kind of scriptures, like you said, it's so lazy, it can be argued either way. I mean, who are the wheat and who are the tares here, and
right.
Who is doing the harm and who is not doing the harm? And that's, I guess, it's subjective. Mm-hmm. But I know where I stand on that, and I feel like a pretty decent person. I might not be, but I've always said this. I've said this on other issues too. That if that's heaven, if heaven looks like that, where we have to treat people like that, that's no heaven for me. That's not my heaven.
Yes.
Hi, my name's Kelly Byers. I'm an activist in the LGBTQ community, and I'm also in the feminist community in Utah County, and I have a name for myself within the church. But I identify as bisexual, and when this policy change happened, I've been fairly active for most of my life, and but I'm a questioning member. And when this policy changed, I decided that I can't do it anymore, basically. I haven't officially resigned, but I've been definitely considering it. I attended the mass resignation with a couple of my friends that runs Elf on the Shelf, if you guys have heard of that. And I guess the biggest thing for me with this policy change is I've taken that approach for the longest time that the best change could happen from within. But the more I think about it, the more I realize, looking on historical background of the church, all of the largest changes have happened from without, from social pressure, from communal pressure outside of the LDS church, and how the church has had to respond in order to continue to survive. And I also wonder about the possible psychological negative things that can happen to people within the church, especially those of us who identify as LGBTQ, if we stay, understanding that the way that this new policy is designed, I cannot raise my hand and sustain my profits and the Quorum of the 12 anymore, because I fundamentally disagree with this policy change, and I fundamentally disagree with the doctrine that homosexuality is not an eternal part of someone's identity. I cannot sustain that. And if you can't sustain a prophet of the church, then there's no point, because you can't hold a temple recommend, you can't hold a calling, you can't be an active member. Therefore, you're completely left out.
Let's talk about psychological damage to
I wanted to ask that question to John.
To members of the church who wish to stay. How do you? This is your area of expertise, and you counsel people about this kind of thing in private practice, I think, don't you?
Yes, but Kendall, do you want to start? Because I think you might even have more thoughts or experience than me. I'm happy to also share my research, but I
tag team it.
Yeah.
Personal experience?
I mean, yeah, I can start from personal experience and state the obvious, that it's not easy. staying, right, and being LGBT or genderqueer. So staying involves or requires a high level of willingness to engage in dissonance, to let that exist, and find healthy ways to hold dissonance, which most human adults and children actually have to do throughout life. That is the nature of life, whether we like it or not. In fact, we tend to not like it, so we run away from it. Fair enough. But so to stay, yeah, it requires a lot of work. Not going to deny it. Not going to be glib about it. And it isn't for everybody, and that's got to be okay. It's got to be okay with us individually, those who don't feel like we can stay or should stay. It's got to be okay with our community, because if we are actually invested in the best interest long-term, the spiritual and mental and physical health and well-being of individuals, then we have to shift our focus towards empowering them genuinely to find their way, inside or outside of the church. But included in that means not short-circuiting, people's ability to find meaning and purpose and fulfillment in practicing their faith as well.
This is particularly difficult, and you're a mature adult male.
Sometimes.
I haven't had a chance to see you in other situations.
Yeah.
But there are kids growing up who are struggling with sexuality, they're struggling with religion, they're struggling with their peer groups, they're struggling with all kinds of things. Mm-hmm. This decision can't be helpful and must be harmful to them.
Yeah, I mean, I've had lots of conversations, particularly with parents, who, in a sense, come at me and challenge me for my choices, and then and help me remember that my choices are my own, and I live with the consequences. But that also, because I've chosen to be vocal, in my community, that it does have impact on other people, and I need to find ways to mitigate any negative impact that I might have. And part of that process for me has also been in acknowledging the privilege that I carry. Like you're saying, I'm not a 14-year-old. So I have as much control as I think I have over my own life and my own choices and consequences. And I'm white, and I'm cisgender, and so many middle class, all kinds of privilege, right? That I need to keep in check and acknowledge, and find ways to not make sure that my story, my choices, my life, don't in any way inadvertently guilt or coerce anybody, 14-year-old or a 45-year-old, into a path that's just unhealthy for them. If anything, I want the inverse is, hey, I'm figuring my stuff out for myself.
You can say shit. I mean, if you really feel the need.
Thank you for the permission.
It's okay.
I wasn't sure. There's a camera. I'm doing it, and if anything, that's the lesson I want you to take. Don't take the lesson of be like Kendall and go to church and curl up in a fetal position every once in a while because it's so hard. I'm a walking sort of cautionary tale, if anything. So.
Yeah, John.
Just really briefly, so for my dissertation or my PhD, we administered a survey on the LGBT Mormon experience. 1,612 people completed that survey. It's the largest survey of its kind ever conducted, not just within Mormonism, but in any sort of field or population. We asked about people's attempts to change their sexual orientation, and then we asked about various decisions that LGBT Mormons could make or not make, and then measured quality of life, depression, self-esteem, sexual identity distress. And you have to be careful with studies because the findings are based on averages, and you could always find sort of a bell curve of experiences in any decision. But I think all of us would agree that you sort of have three decisions or options if you're gay or lesbian or bisexual and Mormon. You can either stay celibate and remain in good standing. You can enter into a mixed orientation marriage, or you sort of can try and pursue sexual experiences as a gay or bisexual or lesbian person and face, the likelihood of excommunication, especially now with the new policy. And so we asked, we just said, well, what's the outcome for those different decisions? And what we found is that on average, the people who chose celibacy or mixed orientation marriages had quality of life ratings lower than people who have a very debilitating disease called lupus. So people who have lupus reported to be better off than those who, on average, were in a mixed orientation marriage or who were celibate. And people who were in legal same-sex relationships, on average, reported quality of life scores, mental health scores, self-esteem scores, on par with the healthy norm within the United States, which is saying a lot. And then the other thing that was just really crazy, we asked about affiliation with the church. And so, you could be active, inactive, disfellowshipped, resigned from the church, or excommunicated. And we found this really bizarre pattern that the least healthy of all choices by far was to be active in the church. Highest levels of depression, lowest levels of quality of life, lowest levels of self-esteem, highest levels of sexual identity distress. And then for all those measures, you would see a slight uptick if you went inactive, and then another slight uptick if you were disfellowshipped from the church. And then you would actually see a statistically significant improvement with a large effect size if you were had resigned from the church. And strangely enough, of those 5 groups, the group that was actually the healthiest and the happiest was those who had been excommunicated from the church. And so
maybe you could figure out a way to distill that into a little card and pass it out to certain groups.
And that's not to say that you're miserable if you're in the church.
Yeah.
It's just to say, on average, most LGBT people don't find the church a healthy, affirming experience, and they're healthier to leave
if they're in that.
But I will say, so I can hear, some of my active Mormon friends saying, see, this is a good policy then, right? It makes sense because you should just leave or whatever. And I just want to point out, always a reminder, you talked about mixed orientation marriages. About 2 or 3 years ago for the blog Feminist Mormon Housewives, I decided I'd heard about a mixed orientation marriage, and I was like, that's a new term I've never heard of. And so I put a call out for stories of people in mixed orientation marriages, and I was flooded with stories. And a mixed orientation marriage, obviously, is someone who identifies as straight, perhaps, and is married to someone of a different orientation. It was overwhelming. We couldn't publish all of them. And some of the stories I didn't even believe were true because they were so bad. So when we say things like just leave, these are people trying to follow the script. And these are, it's heartbreaking. And, this is harsh words, but the policy itself, whether it was the intentions were meant to be, benevolent towards children, it's institutional violence against a group of people because what it's saying to people is there is something fundamentally wrong.
Let me get to this next question or comment here. I think, is this Kendra? Yeah, please come up to the
Thanks, Kelly.
microphone. She called our show earlier in the week and had an interesting observation and story to tell.
My name's Kendra Scott. I was born and raised...
Can somebody help her with, tilt that microphone up a little bit more and talk right?
Is this better?
Yeah, do it like a rock star. There you go.
I was born and raised in the LDS Church, and classic story came out when I was about 18 as a lesbian. It was the classic story. I struggled. I wanted to take my life. I attempted several times. I had parents that told me the whole Adam and Steve thing. I was told that it's a choice, and I challenged that and made the choice by trying to sleep with men. That led me into a very difficult situation of being pregnant and not being able to care for the child, which ironically led to a situation that helped me understand who I was. And because before that, it was the proverbial, I went to church, but I didn't know why I was going to church. And trying to figure out what was best for my child, I placed the baby for adoption. And during my spiritual process and challenging what I believe spiritually, in doing what was best for him, I found myself. And I got the spiritual confirmation that it's okay for me to be gay, and it's okay for me to identify as LDS. And I have never strayed from that. The spiritual experiences that I had placing that baby for adoption and doing what was best for him above my own needs, it was a who saved who situation. And whether it's gay, straight, green, or purple, nobody is ever going to take away that spiritual experience that I had of doing what my Heavenly Father asked me to do, but at the same time, I found out who I was and that it's okay for me to be gay, it's okay for me to believe in the church, and I don't care what gay, straight, LGBT community tells me, I can believe in my Heavenly Father. I can have a testimony of this LDS church. I don't understand everything. I don't understand. Without being blasphemous, it's a bunch of old men who were raised in a different time and place, and they are human. They make mistakes as well. I chalk this whole baptism thing right up with blacks not being able to have the priesthood for whatever reason. I don't understand it. It's not for me to challenge. It's that separation of policy and men versus spirituality and God. And for me, I hold on to the spiritual aspect of the church and what I understand to know to be true. But it's not stopping me from having a life with my partner.
And do you have a child now?
Yes, I have a 5-year-old daughter who I have chosen to raise with the LDS standards and beliefs. She goes to church. She has gone to cousins and family members' baptisms, and she wants to be baptized. I've talked to her about it. She understands families come in all different sizes, and it's all about the love, because that's what Christ teaches, is love and acceptance. I don't understand this church policy, because church was founded on free agency.
Now, will your daughter be able to be?
No, she's not going to be able to be baptized.
She's not going to be able to be baptized.
But it's not
Isn't
going to.
that hurtful to her and to you?
Yes. In fact, I held her just Monday night while she was sobbing in my arms because she couldn't get baptized at 8. And she didn't understand. She doesn't understand. And I have to explain to her that somebody else is taking away her free agency to choose to be baptized because they feel that the way I'm living my life is wrong. They're judging me based on my life and what I feel is best for me. Like everybody else chooses what's best for them. Being gay in a gay relationship and being LDS, I'm disfellowshipped. I'm sure I'll get excommunicated eventually, but I'm not changing either. I'm not leaving either side.
This is a really, I have this discussion with people from time to time about this word faith. And really, you can do anything you want to try to prove that your religion is true to other people. You can say, oh, look, we found these artifacts that prove the Book of Mormon is true, or we found that, but none of that really matters. Or Catholics can say, look, this relic, we have the Shroud of Turin, we have that, but none of that really matters. What really matters is faith. When it comes right down to it, it's only true if you believe it to be so. Isn't that? I mean, you really do have that's faith.
Right, and that's what I struggled with as coming out and trying to figure out which way I tried to denounce one and go focus on the other, and it didn't work for me. I did the whole anti-spiritual thing and, went to gay pride parades and waved my red rainbow flag and whoopity-doo, but you know what I mean? And then I also did I'm going to denounce being gay and try to be celibate and just not I did both, and neither one of them worked. Everybody has to figure this out for themselves, and if we do it with love and acceptance for ourselves first, that's what we're going to emanate to the rest of the world, and that's where the policy changes within the church as well as outside of the church happens. Is whatever they can make whatever policies they want, but it's not going to stop me from raising my daughter the best way that I know how, and teaching her that we still have the free agency, which was the reason why we all came down here to this earth in the first place. And that's where I have the hardest time with this policy change, because if we came down here based on free agency. Christ wanted free agency, Satan didn't. We're getting in the religious part of it. But if we came down here for free agency, why is she being told that she can't exercise that now by choosing to be baptized at 8 years old? And that's where I'm having a hard time. My perspective of this is a work in progress. I'm still trying to work this out and iron this out, but it's not going to stop me from raising her.
Thanks, Kendra. There are a couple of things come up. A lot of things come up in that discussion. I think it demonstrates that this is a hurtful policy to families. But something else that people have been saying, do you think that this would have been different? They're saying that maybe this is a policy because the church really is run by a lot of really old white guys who don't get it. Is that just a possibility?
Well, I'm not gonna disparage people, just calling them old dumb white guys.
I didn't say dumb.
Okay.
You said that. Okay. I didn't say that.
Something about the tone. Sorry. I take it back. I take it back.
There are people
But
who
what's
are
the
on the wrong
connotation?
side of history who are out of touch with things sometimes, and they just don't get it.
Okay. Yeah, that I can take because it's embedded in the policy. This was another part that was really discouraging to me because I thought in some of the official publications from the church there was some momentum forward in terms of just basic understanding of what we meaning like science and people mean by sexual orientation. Like, what is this? And that they had acknowledged it's not a choice. But everything, the way this is written, the philosophy underlying it is that it's so focused on choice. It's so focused on gay as a behavior rather than a neurological, physiological, and psychological drive that is just like anybody else a heterosexual person might experience. And so that's discouraging, yes, that I don't know how else to say it, but they don't get it. They still don't get it. So for somebody like me, that means I got a lot of work ahead of me to say, like, okay, how many different ways can I help you understand? And I don't mean that in a patronizing way. Like, I don't expect an old, white, straight man, cisgender man to understand this easily.
If you look at the way, like, how I was taught to experience personal revelation, you filter it through your own lens. And this is not just an issue for LGBT Mormons, but Mormons of color. I mean, they are all white men, and they're men. And so that affects everything. And it would be really great to see more diversity in the leadership in general, because if they're filtering revelation through their lens, then they're going to be filtering it through a wide variety of experiences that I think that, we're limited on. And that I think is affecting, like you said, it's embedded in all of these policies.
I'll remind you that there was the term forcible rape in there.
Right.
Exactly.
Forcible.
Right, and
I was reminded that there is statutory rape. That's a separate category.
Well,
But yeah.
Also forcible.
yeah. If you look at the history of policies, like I said, I do polygamy research, and when you look at the polygamy policies in place, the people making the policies, I was talking to you guys about J. Reuben Clark, who made a lot of these policies in the 1930s, absolutely affected in their personal lives by this issue. All of our policies are from personal experiences and reactions to things. It's not just like it comes down from heaven out of nowhere. It's because it's a reaction to things, which doesn't negate it being prophetic. It's just how it happens. Right. And so I think that, absolutely. We need more diversity. We need more empathy. We really need to work on that as an institution.
Hallelujah.
Jenny, did you?
Yeah, I just wanted to. I happened to hear Kendra phone into your show the other morning, and I'm really glad that you came. And as a mom, also, I just really want to commend you for what you're doing you're teaching your daughter your truth, your family's truth. As a mom, I've had situations not even having to do with this policy. My oldest daughter is 16. Over many years, and even as a youth leader, with some youth in our ward, where something has been taught, and I've had to say, time out. That's not what's going on. That's not real. Like, just kind of what you heard, throw that out the window. This is what we should be talking about. That sort of thing. Those conversations happen, and I think that gets to really having strong families. Even though this is confusing, even though this, seems to fly in the face of the second article of faith, and I just, I know, yeah, I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I'm Laura, and I grew up in Salt Lake City, and I was brought up in a Mormon family. At the age of 16, I left the church because I couldn't have the friends that I wanted, and I was very confused. When I heard this policy, it hit me so hard because I was thinking about the children. I couldn't believe it. I was really mad because the children are not making the choices that the adults are doing on a piece of paper. The children are not gay. The children, I'm just shocked because the children are being punished for something that they haven't had an opportunity to live their life and make their own choices. And to be honest with you, when I heard about the policy, what went in my mind was not gay people, not what was wrong, is what's going to happen to those children when they go to school on Monday. Mm-hmm. You're no longer Mormon. You're not one of us. You don't get to go to seminary. You don't get to go do this. You don't get to go do that. It's really hard to be brought up in Salt Lake City and not belong to that. So I'm really worried about the children now, really worried. So I just wanted to throw that out that I don't know. And the second thing is that I feel like we've gone 10 steps back because what goes in my mind is I saw these two men get married, and one of the little girls said, I have two mommies now. She was crying, and I saw so much love. And those are the same children that we're punishing now. That's all I got to say.
Thank you. It was about 165 years ago the Mormons left Illinois. They came here to flee persecution, to set themselves apart from what they saw was a society they didn't want to have any part of. They came here to isolate themselves from that society. There's no place to go anymore. But doesn't this decision kind of do that in a way? Do you think it's an attempt by the LDS Church to say, we are setting ourselves apart from modern society? We're making it clear that we want no part of this.
But who are we doing it on the backs of? That's what I would ask. Before, when we were a peculiar people, it was complicated and it was messy and it was hard. But they were making choices that were apart. Polygamy basically was what set us apart, and we don't recognize that anymore at all. It's like if officially.
Yeah.
But who is this on the backs of?
For me, it's all of this, all the vicissitudes of this issue boils down to, in my mind, differences in interpretations and understandings of genuine love. She had brought up, she saw this display of a kind of love, right? And it made her happy. Somebody else with a different mindset that would not make them happy, and that doesn't look like love. And for them, love in its grandest, most long-term sense means teaching what that individual feels is the truth, capital T, that brings salvation forever and ever to an individual. And that equals joy eternal joy. And anything you do to help somebody do that is a pure expression of love. I mean, that was what was expressed by Elder Christofferson in his video, where he said it's not nice to teach false doctrine. It's nice, or in other words, it's loving. It's, in fact, the pure love of Christ and charity to teach true doctrine, because that's what will bring people lasting happiness. Whereas other people look at somebody, a couple that clearly is in love, and says, that's love. And the good feelings I have for them and how I want them to continue to enjoy that love, that's my definition of love. So there's these competing definitions of love that obviously run down this fault line of policies and even doctrine.
Clearly I would like to say, by the way, when I said old white men and you said dumb, and I said I didn't say that, the people who run the LDS Church, the people in charge, are not stupid people. They are not. But do you think that they were surprised? Did this catch them off guard?
The reaction?
Yeah. Did the reaction to this catch them off guard?
I don't know. I think some of us who are progressive hope or think that maybe there wasn't unanimity, or that maybe there's hope for change. I just want to quickly respond to your previous question. If I'm trying to be empathetic for the leaders of the church, if I'm putting myself in their shoes, I think that they see this matter of same-sex attraction or homosexuality as an existential threat to the church.
Yeah.
I think they sort of are thinking sort of 3 strikes and you're out. Polygamy was the first major thing that they had to sort of say is required for salvation. Oh, wait a minute, we're going to take it back. Blacks in the priesthood, we went on a limb, 10 plus years after the Civil Rights Act of 1964, and then they had to roll it back and say God changed his mind, in so many words. I think that they see now, what do we have left? We're not clinging to many of the distinctive doctrines of Mormonism anymore to placate the evangelicals. We're sort of softening a lot of our harder doctrines. We're becoming more and more mainstream. What do we have left? It's authority. It's that our prophets speak to God. The other churches don't have authority, and they don't have a prophet. And so the day that the church sort of takes that 3rd strike and says, okay, we were just kidding. You can be gay. You can be in the church. You can get gay temple married. I think it's the day that many members sort of say, all right, you guys are just kind of making this up as you go along. And so honestly, they're struggling to preserve a church that they love. And to them, they see this as potentially destroying that institution. And so I think this is sort of a last-ditch effort to say, we can't accommodate too much. It's like Tevye. At some point, if you bend too far, you break.
But you make it sound almost too Machiavellian, though. I mean, you make it sound too like...
No, I think they sincerely believe that homosexuality, same-sex attraction is wrong. I think they're sincere in that. And I just think they feel like if they accommodate this, it's their 3rd strike, and people aren't going to take them seriously anymore.
But were they ever accommodating?
They were starting to be kind of accommodating.
I know, so they were changing the environment, changing the tone. The doctrine never changed. On homosexuality?
No, not on homosexuality, but
Okay.
the way that we view the family.
I'm not talking about that. No, I'm talking about, just this issue.
Fair.
So that hasn't changed, and I don't think they were capitulating on it. But I do think some of the hardliners were concerned that, wait, are we sending, a soft message here? Let's clarify, because, and I do take them at their word, out of their sense of what love is, that is conditional, this is the only way to express pure love.
Yeah. And I think that Kendall's really onto something when he talks about the expressions of love, because there's confusion when we hear, well, this is out of love, and it doesn't feel like love. And I think for a lot of people.
I think we have time. We're actually a little over, but let's go one final question.
Wow, thank you. Hi, I'm Skippy, and I was episode 41 of the Cultural Hall podcast. And I want to say, I think for myself and a lot of people, especially the 2 people ago who has a daughter, I don't have a horse in this race in that sense. Like, I'm a member of the church because I genuinely believe that Joseph Smith saw God in Jesus Christ, right? And that, for me, is a very fundamental reason of why I'm a member of the church. And my heart has just gone with the people who have her situation, so much so that it breaks my heart like it does a lot of people. And I so fully believe that you still need to, if you really do believe that God and Jesus Christ spoke with Joseph Smith, you need to stay in the church, because there's lots of things that come at you that you don't know all the answers to. And because I'm not in their shoes, I get exactly why they left. And for people like you that have stayed in the church, I just go, holy crap, you are awesome for doing that. Because in my mind's eye, I don't think that if I was in that position, I could do that. You know, I really do not think that I could do that. It just, you amaze me, and people in her situation amaze me. And so my question, now that I've said all that, goes to something that a friend of mine posted on Facebook, and I'll throw it out as a question to you guys. Of a friend of mine said that he wished that he had not been allowed to go to church when he was 8 years old, so that when he was 18, he could have, as an adult or with more of an adult mindset, chosen whether or not to join the church at 18. And he said, why don't we have, raise it up kind of thing. And so I just want to throw that out and see what you guys think.
Take a test, you take a test, and if you pass, you get baptized.
Well, I mean, there is the inconsistency here of, it's in Scripture that age 8 is the age of accountability, and it's like on the heads of the parents to do the right thing, get them baptized, teach them in the right way, and so on. That's in Scripture. And now we have this exception. There's some tension, I'll say, between that. Yeah.
I wouldn't be opposed to raising the age, though. I think I didn't feel prepared at 8. I don't think I understood the commitments and the covenants that I was making at 8. Not to say that I was damaged by that per se, but there wasn't so much at stake for my family either. So, but let's be consistent. Let's not be discriminatory in that. And one thing I want to say about staying or leaving the church, to what you're saying about this conflict with people are going to have less and less tolerance for these policies, which I agree. I think the world is changing. Mormonism has given us something that I think is a gift, but it's also for accountability. And that is, they taught me to stand up for truth and righteousness, to stand for what is right. Do what is right, let the consequence follow. That comes in our hymn. And that is what so many Mormons are doing right now. This feels fundamentally wrong to their spirit. And I was also taught to follow the prophet, right? But something about this helps me distinguish. This is a good practice for Mormons to separate church and God, what we know to be right, and to stand up. And I think that Mormons are doing that. And that makes me proud of the Mormon movement.
And you highlight that we're on a collision course. All this is about, we're on a collision course in the conflict between doctrine and love, what feels right? What true love. And we're on a collision course, and we got years for it to play out.
Anything final, Jenny?
Yeah, I kind of to what Skippy shared. I just, as a member, I think that maybe an active member of the church, that Skippy and I maybe fall into the same category, and I know that we're not the only ones, that there are several of us who we don't fault people. We understand that this, for a lot of people, was the last straw, and that was it, and they had to go. That being said, for people, if you have the energy, if you have the capacity, if you have the emotional boundaries to do so, please stay. We need you. We need your voice. As for me and my house, we are functioning on faith, and we are committed to being a part of a more compassionate body of Christ and moving toward what Zion is, to be of one heart. That's
John, any last thought?
I'll just offer an affirmation and a counter message as well. If you have that burning testimony, if you feel called to stay, I celebrate you. And on the contrary, there are a lot of people who feel like it's damaging for them to stay and that it's harmful. and yet they fear that if they leave, can they be a good person? Can they find joy? Can they raise healthy, happy children? And I'm here to tell you, I'm not trying to be glib. My family's happier than it's ever been. My family's healthier than it's ever been. My children are happier and healthier than they've ever been. And don't stay out of fear. Stay because you believe in it and you want to make a difference. But also leave if you feel like don't fear leaving, because there's a big, bright, beautiful world out there and fantastic people who aren't Mormon.
Thank you. I want to thank you all for coming. I want to thank our guests, John Dehlin, Lindsay Hansen-Park, Jenny Noonan-Eckton, and Kendall Wilcox. Thank you to our technical staff, Dave Peterson, Trent Anderson, and Jordan Dela Cruz. Everybody here at 50 West, Andy Hoyce and John Rivera. Also, thank you to Dylan Allred and Corey O'Brien for producing the show. Our next show will be Wednesday, December 16th. We'll be talking about the homeless population in Salt Lake City. There's talk of moving them. Where are they going to move them? Your neighborhood? Yours? We're going to find out. Please like What Do You Think Utah on Facebook, follow at Think Utah on Twitter, or visit our website, thinkutah.org. See you next month. Have a good Thanksgiving. Good night.